I'd like to clarify a little bit more about the lower self and the higher self, just so we can get a better idea and understanding about these things. The lower self, like I said, is the subconscious mind of you, which is further connected to the subconscious mind of all human beings on the whole planet, which is further connected to the subconscious mind of the entire biosphere, of the entire consciousness of the whole planet. And as I now understand it, it is even further connected dimensionally inward toward the center of the earth through all the dimensional worlds that actually are a reflection of all that is outside the planet. When I was first given the name Drunvalo Melchizedek, the angel said that the name Drunvalo Melchizedek was a druid name. And they said that Drunvalo was the name of a little tree that grew by a creek. And so I accepted that. I said, okay, Drunvalo sounds like what would be a druid name, but Melchizedek, in my mind, I was going for years, that just doesn't sound like a druid name. It seems to be in the Hebrew traditions and in the Christian traditions, but never thought of it as being druid. And when I was in England at one point, and I had connected with Merlin and was studying and becoming aware of the ascension in the Druid tradition, they have a very similar process of initiation where you become connected to the trees, and specifically the oak trees and the fairies and the life. You start going through the same process, and eventually you ascend not away from the earth but toward the center of the earth. And I'm picking this book up and reading about their ascension process toward the center of the earth, where it says, right in this Druid book, that the Druids believed that in the very center of the earth was Melchizedek. Mine just about fell over when I saw that. And realizing that the two poles of the end, that they saw it the same way, but exact mirror image of the whole thing. And so when we're talking about lower self, we're really talking about a vast consciousness that extends down through all of life, but in a different way, and that appears to relate to us as human beings in a very childlike way, where the consciousness that comes from above, from the stars and the heavens and all the higher dimensional levels, appears to communicate to us from more like a father figure than a childlike figure. And the ancients also felt it was extremely important that ascension began away from the earth. And I'm still learning what this is all about. In fact, the whole aspect of Jesus coming onto the earth was that he was the first one to ascend away from the earth. And if you read the England tapes and see what that is all about, you'll begin to understand even more about what I'm talking about here. To further define this thing between the lower and the higher self, with kind of us in the middle, it's very much like the macrocosm and the microcosm linked between the two of us. It's very much like the planet Earth and the sun. The sun is linked to the Earth through a gravitational field, and they're linked into a single system, but they're very, very, very different. And this is very much like the difference between the higher self and the lower self. Another way to see this connection between lower self and higher self is that it is very much like the planet Earth, because the lower self really is the planet Earth, and the higher self is like the sun that is connected to all the other stars and headed out that way, and that there's a connection between the two. It's very much like the macrocosm, the stuff that's really big, and the microcosm that's really little, and us in the middle. There were images of this all over the world, by the way. In Egypt, you would see the vulture on one end of this image, and the snake on the lower end of the image, with the right eye of Horus in the middle. representing these three levels: the bird that was of the high, the snake that was on the ground, and the eye that was in the middle. And you see that same image if you go into Peru. You see it as the condor and the another kind of snake that I don't remember, and it was a particular kind of leopard that they used in the middle. The Mayans used the condor and a black leopard, I believe it was, and a rattlesnake. And the American Indians used the eagle, and I think it was the eagle and the coyote and the rattlesnake. All over the world, the Tibetans used a rooster and a pig and a certain kind of snake. Again, all over the world, the same image representing these three different components that all have to be brought together for us to be a whole person again, because we have separated from all of these kinds of things. So how does one really begin in all of this? Well, once you have got to the place where you can begin to open up to nature and let this inner child out, this is a very big, important step. But if you allow your psychic side to begin to, if you can just trust in yourself psychically, there's lots of ways. For example, when I was learning dowsing, and dowsing could be a very useful tool to learning about how you can connect with lower self. My teacher used to have this house, and it had shag rugs. It was a two-story house. It was a big house, and his wife would take a corn kernel and hide it in the shag rug somewhere in the house. He could find it every time within 60 seconds. Time after time after time. And all he would do is just take a map of the house, and and I suggest that you do something like this. He'd take a map of the house and draw a rough thing of all the rooms. And he used two tools, a pendulum and a set of rods. You can either use the crossing rods or the bending ones, like the sticks. And so she would hide it, and she says, "Okay, I hit it." And he would just go, "Where is it?" He would ask where it was, and he would allow the pendulum to just move. You have to step aside, no ego. Just allow it to go, and it moves over, and it goes, and it'll pinpoint a spot. You then have to absolutely believe and trust. That's the place. So he would show which room it was and approximately where it was in the room. He would then run upstairs, go to that spot, which he knew was about so big, take his other rods and go, and then go down and just pull the corn kernel out. And I found I could do the same thing. There was nothing to it. And as soon as I did it one time, that was it. I did it another time, and wow, this is not just coincidence here. And I could just keep doing it. And I was able to discover, so you don't have to find just water, for example, when you're dowsing. You can find anything. He used to find all the oil fields and everything. You can find anything. It doesn't make any difference. He used to find people who'd have stolen cars. And he'd just take a map of the United States, find out what city it was, take a map of that city, find out what block it was now parked on, and then they would just go there and get the car and drive it away. And I remember when he first taught me how to use the rods and relative to finding water, and the excitement of feeling those rods pull over so much that the rod would break off at the end. I mean, the very thought of holding a stick out and have the end of it break off when you're holding it back here is impossible by anything that we know. Yet I used to break from maybe 10 or 15 of them a day when I was doing this, because it would get so strong they'd break off. So I'd have to carry a whole bunch of them. Until I found out that you could use nylon rods that don't break and they work better. And so this is a way that you could begin to see and prove directly to yourself that these things are true. You could have people hide things in this room like this and find them immediately. And you build confidence between you and your lower self, and you begin to see this happening. It can be used in many, 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 many different ways. You know, I could go on and on all of that, but even without dowsing rods, you can begin to use your intuition, where you believe that something is true and something's going to happen, and allow it to come up. Trust yourself. Allow it to begin to come out. And this allows the connection, the communication to begin to take place between you and the lower self, between the whole planet. And the more that communication takes up, the more the planet wants to communicate with you. Mother Earth loves you, really, really loves you, and wants you to open up. But you have to allow it. There's free will here. You don't have to. You could stay locked in your world forever. But if you can allow it, if you'll open it up, think of the possibility that there might be something more to this world than just driving around in cars and putting money in a bank account. There might be something that's maybe more interesting than that. And you begin to explore the human potential. And the human potential is vast. And it leads into worlds and into places that right now you can't really imagine. But you've got to start somewhere. And the beginning is starting with being childlike, innocent, being like a baby. And I really think that this is what Jesus meant when he said, "Lest ye become like children, you will not enter into the kingdom of heaven." I now think that he meant that literally, absolutely literally, that without the childlike innocence, you're simply not going to get into heaven and go into the higher dimensional levels. So there are many. I want to cover one more area of this. In terms of opening up and beginning the process, there are now many levels of therapy that are out there that have been developed in the last few years that are really, really good. You know, and when you go back to Freudian type thoughts that kind of, you know, begin to see the connection between the physical body and the emotional and mental, and then going into people who, like Wilhelm Reich, who took this way to a much deeper level than Freud ever dreamed of, and through Wilhelm Reich, who began to see that things that happen in your childhood are buried in your muscles and in the constriction of your electrical circuits, and out here around you in your crystalline fields and everything else in your aura. And that these patterns are so painful that we don't want to experience them, so we bury them. This gave rise to Fitz Pearl and a lot of the work that he did in psychodrama, where you can begin to release these through directly getting into these experiences. And Ida Rolf, who said, well, let's go directly into the muscles and find them there and work in those kinds of ways. And Mary's people began to work deeper and deeper until finally hypnotherapy came forth. And hypnotherapy has become an awesome tool in all of this. What used to take 10, 15, 20 years can now be done in 3 or 4 sessions, in 3 or 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours. Things that, and without pain, and very, very quickly, can be released. There are many, many things within a human being that the average human being is not aware of, that is blocking them from being able to open up to their inner child and to allow the sensitivity to the reality to return. There are actual living forces inside of many people called entities that have been there for sometimes thousands and thousands of years, many times all the way back into Atlantis. And these entities need to be released. Hypnotherapy can move through these things very, very quickly. There are many things that have happened in your past lives, such as being stabbed or shot or hands cut off or heads cut off or raped or murdered or